Hi, my name is Adrian Ludens, and the story I'm about to read, I had submitted this for an anthology for stories about food and eating-related horror, and the editor and the publisher came back with some ideas, and unfortunately their ideas were at odds with each other, and there wasn't really much I could do to make them happy. So I did a rewrite and included some of their ideas, but they didn't like the rewrite because it was too sci-fi, not enough horror. So they ultimately passed on the story, and I didn't want it to go to waste. So I shortened it to share with you guys tonight. So this is Bloated Tick by Adrian Ludens. Lipa drained his inner energy by psychically replicating human features. Thanks to his nerve net, Lipa could hear the frigid February wind gusting between the buildings, the landlord's stifled cough, a cell phone's chirp, canned sitcom laughter. He also heard and felt his stomach rumbling. He waited for the property owner to select the correct key from the large ring, and then they entered the tiny apartment. The landlord, Kel Rogers, was a short bald man with a bristly mustache and ruddy complexion. Rogers seemed, to Lipa, blissfully unaware of the unhappiness and squalor that surrounded him. "It's small but clean," Rogers said, beaming. He pulled open the curtains in an attempt to let in more light, but the sun had already sunk below the seedy tenements across the street. "Nice view of the city," Rogers said. "A lot of history here." He motioned outside with one arm, like a game show host marveling over a prize-packed showcase. Lipa glanced out and grunted. "Comes fully furnished, as you can see," Rogers said. Lipa eyed the tattered couch, cigarette-burn-scarred end table, and framed black-and-white photocopy of The Last Supper in turn. He had no use for any of the items. The landlord raised his arm, coughed into the crook of his elbow, and scurried down the short hallway. "Come check out the bedroom and bathroom." The bedroom, only slightly larger than most walk-in closets, needed repainting. Dead flies lay in drifts on the sill between the glass pane and the screen. A variety of stains broke up the monotony of the beige carpet. The rust-stained bathroom fixtures should have been replaced decades ago. Overall, the aesthetics of the tiny apartment left much to be desired. The emotional resonance broadcasting from the squalid building, however, pleased Lipa a great deal. The couple living right next door had begun to argue, hurling angry insults at each other with spiteful abandon. Rogers droned on, raising his voice to drown out the bickering tenants. "It's perfect," Lipa said. "But you haven't seen the kitchenette yet." "Don't need to. I'll take it." Lipa, in his natural form, stretched languidly, his slender tentacles draped over the edge of the couch. His neighbors, the Parkers, were at it again. He exposed his nerve net and concentrated on their words to determine what the fight was about this time. "People do it all the time, for Christ's sakes," Barry Parker complained. His booming, gravelly voice matched the oversized frame of an aging former jock. "Well, I don't," his wife Megan retorted. She was a petite woman with dishwater blonde hair and gray-green eyes. "And I won't. If that's something you think you need, you can pack your suitcase right now." "Everything I do for you, and you won't even—" "If you're going to keep talking about it, I'm leaving." "Fine, go." A door slammed, and Lipa knew the woman had left the apartment. He heard Barry mumbling, perhaps as he grabbed himself a beer from the refrigerator. If he kept with habit, Barry would sit and seethe in front of the television for a few hours. Lipa slid from the couch. He'd had enough sustenance for now. He slithered into the bedroom. From an otherwise empty closet he removed a suitcase. He used his tentacles to release the latches and lift the lid. Lipa removed a laptop computer. The simple device served as a conduit to his sole source of income on this planet. He found hacking to be the easiest method of obtaining currency. The human English language only had 26 letters, and humanity's numbering system was rudimentary at best. This aspect of his survival, at least, came to him easily. Lipa sometimes hacked several hundred bank accounts in a single solar cycle. He stole just enough to afford a residence, preferably in a low-income neighborhood where the population was generally unhappy. He had learned to keep one or two changes of human clothing so he could further blend in during his rare outside excursions. He never skimmed more than he needed. Lipa, not a cruel being, only wanted to survive. Perhaps the Council would someday realize their error and retrieve him from this backward prison planet. He never gave up hope of reuniting with his family. Lipa hunched over the computer, extended his wiry tentacles, and went to work. Upon waking at the beginning of the next solar cycle, Lipa could hear the Parkers arguing again. "You burned the meatloaf." "Sorry, it's not perfect. Maybe you want to try cooking tomorrow night?" "Now you're just being spiteful." "I've got a lot on my mind, Barry. Dr. Tolliver said with fewer patients making appointments, he can't justify my full-time salary." "Well, if you're going to be sitting around all day with me working to support you, maybe you ought to rethink your stance on that thing I wanted to try." A dish crashed and shattered against the common wall between the dwellings. The sound of a slamming door came, followed by receding footsteps. Then all quieted next door. Lipa slinked into the living room and crawled onto the couch, contented. He stared out the window a while, then slipped into a sleep state of inactivity. Lipa regained awareness, curled in the center of the dwelling's dirty floor. Something felt wrong. A bloated feeling in his stomach radiated outward. He withdrew his nerve net, hoping to stem the incoming waves of negative emotion. Each passing moment brought Lipa closer to immobility. The fuzzy gray light of the solar cycle filtered in through the dwelling windows. The Parkers would be waking soon, Megan rising first, making breakfast for the two of them, then showering and dressing for work while her husband ate. He knew both Parkers started work at the same time, but Barry's place of employment was closer of the two. Megan, Lipa had learned, had to catch a crosstown bus to get to the dentist's office where she worked as a receptionist, so she was always first out of the apartment. Lipa tried to relax, waiting for the misery next door to abate. "Barry," Megan called, "there's a special bulletin on TV." Silence unwound for several minutes, but Lipa felt unease radiating from the other apartment. "A goddamn quarantine," Barry said. "This is bullshit. You think I'm going to like being stuck here? Going to work was the best part of my day." "I knew all along you liked being around that pretty boy dentist." "I just appreciate 8 hours away from you." Lipa's outer epidermis stretched to the point of breaking. His osmoregulation and respiration systems struggled to accommodate his newly gained size. The first tendrils of panic touched his mind. "You better watch your mouth." Barry's tone came out measured and cold. "I won't tolerate any more of your disrespect." Megan said something that Lipa only heard half of, and understood even less. Her tone, however, conveyed calculated cruelty. "Let him fill my cavities." Barry roared. The sound of heavy, pounding footsteps preceded a muffled cry and a tremendous crashing sound. Lipa waddled away from the wall. He heard the meaty sound of fists connecting with flesh. Lipa staggered, fell, writhed on the floor. Time passed. The sound of sirens drew close. Something was happening on the street below, but Lipa couldn't reach the window. He felt far too bloated. Lipa tried to rise, but found he couldn't. Perplexed, he assessed his situation. Lipa found himself wedged between the walls of the tiny living room. A dangerous predicament. Booted feet pounded up the stairs. Police, he realized. Someone pounded on the Parkers' door. Lipa tried maneuvering again without success. Another bellow of rage came from the other side of the wall. It vibrated Lipa's nerve net. So strong was its auditory and emotional impact. He tried protective measures once again, to no avail. He was too close. He couldn't get away. Much like the council's sentence of exile, the walls holding him were stiff and unyielding. It was over in moments. The police officers shouted their warnings. Barry responded by firing several rounds through his front door. Semi-automatic gunfire filled the air. Slugs zinged and ricocheted like a swarm of supercharged hornets. Barry Parker killed one officer and injured the other before the seventh slug to enter his body severed his aorta and ended his life. He bled out on the floor, 6 feet away from Lipa on the other side of the wall. Lipa, however, knew none of this. A stray slug had punched through the thin plaster wall. It punctured his epidermis and tore through his mesoglea. All the pent-up negative emotions erupted from his bloated figure in one enormous psychic and corporeal detonation. The prisoner from a distant planet deflated like a popped water balloon. He coated the walls of his tiny apartment with putrid, greasy entrails and translucent, pliable tissue. The psychic fallout, magnified by Lipa's alien cerebral cortex, led to months of therapy, years of nightmares, and 2 eventual suicides among the residents. The building itself could not keep tenants, was condemned, and after the quarantine was lifted, was demolished. That is the end of Bloated Tick